probably gonna need my glasses, huh?
Yeah, that's a definite. Considering you couldn't see the signage.
Okay,
That
Dad.
might help.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 25th meeting of the Abington Finance Committee. We are gathered here tonight to go over the now final budget for the town, or final-ish budget that we have. It's close to final. It's an updated version. It is close to final, as we still have a couple of collective bargaining agreements that are collectively bargaining. But it is very close to done. We have it here in front of us tonight. It's the first time we are seeing that, but we also have the special and annual town meeting warrants, which I believe there are some planning board articles that are still being worked on, but do they have placeholders in here for them? So, yep. So that is what our agenda is for tonight, to go over the newest budget and then the warrant articles, prepare for in the next couple of weeks making our recommendations, which need to be done by May 11th at the latest. Hopefully we'll have those done before that. But I know one of the things that we typically do to kind of jump in quickly to the town meeting warrants, we typically have petitioners who have financial related warrant articles come and talk to us about their articles. I was emailing with Dory about that, and I think this year there's not anything particularly financial for people to come here. The Women's Place, formerly A New Hope, which we have, which we have every year. So we've had them in before for the new people
And the other
every year.
petitioner is
So,
zoning articles.
yep, which we do not always, but typically defer to the zoning and planning board.
Right.
So, do we want to start out by jumping into the cover sheet of the new budget? Maybe spin one of the mics around for.
Sure, and there's nothing substantially different. The documents you have in front of you is, again, the summary page, but you also have the new line item budget, which the town accountant has provided with holes punched for your convenience. I'm sorry, is yours not punched, is that what you're saying? Ooh. Passive aggressiveness here on behalf of the town accountant, I think.
We can take Dr. Tyler's and
I'm
pass
sorry,
that over.
okay, well, we can,
No, I'm fine.
I'm sorry, okay, all right.
I have a whole bunch of.
Sounds like there's other issues to be dealt with here later, but, and obviously that reflects the summary document. It obviously plays from the special town meeting warrant, which, but you'll see it is a balanced document now, which obviously deals with the snow deficit, as well as the recommended spending plan, which includes the warrant articles on the annual town meeting warrant. And those warrant articles include I'm sorry, if you look at the summary sheet, and you're all familiar with it, but unlike the prior ones in the fine print, if you don't have your reading glasses on, the warrant articles that are listed down the bottom, with the that are funded, with the exception of the capital article, because the article recommendations are listed right on the warrant themselves. So there wouldn't be the need for the motion as read to actually reflect the funding source. It would be presumably, if it is what the Finance Committee wishes to recommend, it could be just as printed in the warrant. That was the goal.
And
So,
those are on the annual warrant.
the annual, yes. So if you look at the total warrant articles at the very top of the summary page, which total $116,111, that reflects Article 2 on your annual town meeting warrant, which the town clerk has requested an increase of a 3% raise this year. That accommodates that. As you know, the elected official pursuant to Mass state law has to be funded a town meeting warrant article. The Article 6 is the $14,000 transportation, school transportation article. Article 9 is the petition article you just referred to, by petition. The Article 13 is the zoning bylaw, comprehensive zoning bylaw update article that has been requested for funding by the Board of Selectmen. That is an estimate after getting some input from some of my peers. Article 15 is the master plan update requested by the planning board. This is the year that the 10 years, the current master plan expires. So that adds up to the $116,111 that you see at the top in total expenses, total warrant expenses.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly, Greg.
Here we go. The 60,000 to reimburse employees who work on private details.
You're looking at the special town meeting warrant.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
That, is that not what we're talking about, by the way?
We are not talking about that at the
Then
moment.
go on to it until we
Okay,
get there.
that's fine,
Thank
okay.
you.
So that's the summary document you're looking at the moment. Okay. And,
Just to
yes,
quick clarify for the newer people, the special town meeting, which we will officially convene before the annual town meeting, it'll be sort
Yeah.
of one meeting separated out
Yeah, yeah.
into two parts. The special town meeting, we take care of essentially bookkeeping to close out the current fiscal year budget.
Okay.
And then the annual town meeting will be the stuff for the coming years, the fiscal year 19.
Okay. Thanks.
very good. Thank you, thanks, Matt. So those are, so funding the warrant articles that you see down the bottom is what accounts for that total expenses at the top. In addition, as I mentioned, Article 3, I'm sorry, what is the, Article 4 is the capital spending article on the annual town meeting warrant. The recommended funding sources of free cash, plus those, obviously those revenue sources that are specific, like the water department, that are listed on the warrant, specific to those.
Article 3
I'm
is
sorry,
capital,
Article
Article 4
3.
is the result.
I'm
revolving.
sorry, Article 3. So the budget document with the punch holes, the new one, which reflects the same as the summary document here. The only thing this doesn't reflect, as you already mentioned to it, Matt, is the transfers or the changes that will have to be made when the final calculations are made for the recently adopted ratified police contract, and the final, what we hope is the final agreement on a fire contract and clerical agreements. Those hopefully will be done next week. That's my goal, and ratified hopefully by the Board of Selectmen on May 7th, hopefully. And I know it's getting late, but thank goodness this happens every 3 years for most agreements. But the good news, as you know, is these are, the funding for these are contained in operating line items that are recurring, and they are, these, would not be funded or recommended to be funded with one-time funding sources. And I've tried my best, as you know, to try to keep this Finance Committee informed the best I can within the difficulties of the system that we work within, as you know, as to where those funds may be located to try to fund these contracts. So the funding is available within we have reasonable funding available, but those would be the last pieces that would have to be moved within what you already see in front of you here. So, and obviously, we're trying to make all haste to pull this together. So, I think other than that, going through, again, if there's any questions about Article 4 in particular, would be those items on the capital plan that have kind of come to the priority list this year. Some of them are fairly new. For instance, the moving the poles, underground utilities on Glenowitz Way this year. That's not something that had been, something that was on the drawing board up until this past year in conjunction with the school project. Unfortunately, it's not something that is within the school project that could have been done within that. But it's now or never, because it needs to be done before the final pavement of Glenowitz Way. It doesn't make any sense not to do it now before the Glenowitz Way is paved next summer. It would be, be ripping the road up again to put, 6 poles underground after they pave the road is asinine. So, as an example of why some things have come to the fore that you haven't seen, or we haven't contemplated in the past, so.
Do we have budget-specific, not warrant-specific questions for any of our town staff here before us?
I do, but
Barbara?
I was waiting to see if anyone else did. Anyone?
Lead off.
So the charter tuition on the cherry sheet receipts. What's the cause of the jump in that from 65,000 to 82,000? Under cherry sheet,
Oh, the receipts, the anticipated receipts on the charter school tuition?
Yes.
The cause of that presumably is we have additional students last year that went to charter schools. That's why we would be eligible for more additional charter school tuition. And this is based upon the governor's proposed budget, but these aren't going to change based upon whether it's the House 1, which is technically the governor's budget, or throughout the budget, I'm sure recommended by the House of Representatives or the Senate. I wouldn't anticipate these changing. These particular cherry sheet anticipated receipts. Would I have that correct, Sue, as far as you know? But this is based upon last year's enrollment. Thank you. Yeah, so
For the
this would be,
other,
so additional probably an additional student that went to a charter school. Probably only one student, but.
for the other areas on the cherry sheet section, are the differences between what we had seen in the previous requested level service, are those from getting a slightly better picture of what we expect?
The original requested and level was based on last year's because the governor hadn't put out his budget yet, and then he talked at a meeting and put out his budget that he was increasing it due to the fact that they received more in taxes this year than they anticipated.
Yes, and what has subsequently, the House Ways and Means has proposed a budget which would be a little bit more beneficial to Abington in terms of its estimates, but we're not counting on that yet. We're just not counting. This is based upon what the governor is proposing, not based upon what the House Ways and Means, because as you know, the state budget process doesn't culminate until well after our town meeting has come and gone, so for us to be projecting additional revenue based on anything beyond, I know it was.
And that was why I was asking.
There was a time.
Seeing numbers going up.
Yeah.
I know we're very cautious about
Yeah.
trusting.
Yes. Now, I'm not going to tell you that
Going up.
there have been times in past years, not in the last, half dozen or so years, I'm sure, in Abington, but there are times back, I'm sure, in the, mid-late 90s and where you almost have to trust every possible dime that's been proposed just to avoid layoffs. But that's, fortunately, we haven't been in one of those cycles in recent years, so we have the luxury of not having to try to anticipate every bit of state aid. The other downside potentially is you like to look at the potential revenue side, and it turns out you get hit with charges on the back end that you didn't expect. So at this stage, we're just relying upon the governor's proposed budget numbers. And if down the road, it turns out there's additional financial benefit to the town of Abington before the end of the state budget process, and there's opportunities later in the, to direct funds, that's fine. But we're too cautious at this stage, so.
So kind of the same thing for the meals tax and local receipts,
Yes.
down 6,000, well, 6,500.
Yeah, that's
Anticipating less.
That's based upon a history of actuals. That's what, multi-year of actuals, yeah, it's what we, it's similar with like our new growth number. As you can see, it's down a bit from, we just use historical averaging formula over a number of years. That's all. We expect it's going to be higher than the number that's on here, but just, one of the, we just use an averaging model over a five-year period because we'd rather, it's just a good fiscally conservative approach at this stage.
So question in that regard, the licensing and permits, we dropped that between requested and the current.
Well, again, keeping in mind the requested is,
Several months old. at this point.
yeah, and when requested is really kind of a misnomer. Requested is what we start,
No,
our
no,
financial team starts with.
Right,
as
that,
a- yes.
I was
Yes.
just referring to
Correct,
that by
Yes.
the name,
Right.
knowing that that's really just the starting
Yes.
point of the process.
Right, right.
Because, like, for example, the meals tax, that went up, or that stayed the same from the first draft to this
Yes,
version, but the fees, sorry, the licenses and permits went down from the first draft to this one.
once again, you're looking at, on the whole, over time, you're looking at averaging formulas, because at some point, these are going to vary over a period of time. I mean, you look at, for instance, your largest estimated receipt of motor vehicle excise alone dwarfs the rest. If you get even a small economic, blip downward, it can have an impact, a significant impact on your motor vehicle receipts. And
I was gonna say
that's all it takes.
I was gonna
And
ask
that's all it takes.
what that number is usually like, because I would assume that most people's value goes down
Over
throughout the year, but then
Yeah.
it's
First 5 years, they drop,
when people buy
Yeah.
new vehicles,
right.
that would obviously bump
Right.
up, but
And a new vehicle,
like if we had any kind of a formula of what to expect
yeah,
there, or if we just go
Right.
year by
But
year,
it- but-
year by year, basing it off of.
but your excise value
Yes.
drops significantly in your first 5 years. So you get into a little bit of a decline where people hold off buying new cars
Right.
for even a short period of time, and that can take a significant hit. And again, as a estimated receipt, as you can see, that dwarfs the rest. So if you're not being a little bit conservative with your estimated receipts in general, as you can see,
You can get in trouble.
You can get in trouble. You can get in trouble, yes. So it's as much of an art as a science, estimating receipts. It really is. And if you're on the wrong side of your estimated receipts, needless to say what that can do to your free cash, and what that does to your FY '20 and subsequent potential financial condition in years to come. And that's what, that's what we think of the subsequent fiscal year as much as, well, not as much, but a significant part of the time when we are actually dealing with the current year's budget. And
And I do think one of the things to point out, both for the newer people and for the people either in the audience or watching, is that we do, you have, over the time that you've been here and that I've been on the board at least, tried to remain very conservative with the estimates. And
That's what I was just gonna ask.
keep those very low, and that reflects in the free cash that we have had at the end of each of the last several years, so.
Yes, we've been in, again, in, I think, three of the four last fiscal years, we've been in excess of $1 million. I think one year we were about 1.7. I think that was a particular issue with closing out some old sewer betterments, so that was a little bit of a, I think the other year we were close to $1 million, and, so, you obviously don't want to gouge receipts to the extent that you're not making revenue available. On the other hand, it has paid off in terms of increased bond rating, which reflects well in what people are paying in debt service over 20 years on a new school building and sewer pipes. I mean, so, it's a balance. But obviously, I would rather be here than on the other side. But you know what? Eventually, we're going to have an economic downturn, and we're going to be trying to squeeze every penny we can to keep town services. And when that time comes, we're going to be singing a little bit of a different tune. But while we can, we want to be reasonably conservative.
Greg, does that answer?
Nope.
He hasn't asked the question yet.
He thought it was good, though.
I knew it was
This might not be a conversation for this, but has anybody talked about the new inspection, the new Mass State inspection hurting that number? It's much more
Yeah.
strict.
No, actually, it's a good point, but no
The only reason I even say it is because I have a
Yeah.
classic car. People that do have them are kind of getting scrutinized at this particular point
Hard enough.
because of the newer rules that rust issues, things like that, that are, perfectly fine. I just didn't know if anybody has put a number to that, and if they haven't, it is what it is.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
It's a good question for me to ask among my peers, though, to put out there on the streets.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I wonder if on the other side of that, it could lead to people having to buy new cars or newer cars.
The people that I've talked to, they won't trade the classic car in for that, but it is,
Saying
it is a
not
reason to get it.
Not necessarily a classic car, but
Yes.
someone just.
No,
has
but it
a
is. It's
old-
100% a reason that your car won't pass something.
Yeah.
If it's a 10 or 15-year-old car, you do need to go out and get a newer car, so.
But I mean, you look at these numbers, and it's one of those where you could say, well, we could probably deal, I mean, again, we have to deal with the Department of Revenue, too, and we have to pass the smell test with the Department of Revenue, and we could easily justify additional revenue to spend. That's not the question. And we could, we deal with our department heads and, and again, our financial team, including us, Mr. Pistorino and Sonia Hodge and our school superintendent and assistant superintendent. We sit around the table, and, it'd be easy for us to be able to justify more revenue to spend to fulfill a lot of the needs that we all, know we have, and justify that to the Department of Revenue without, but we also know that in FY '20 and '21, we could be, we could be in trouble anyway if we have an economic downturn. But, we also know that if we squeeze every dime out of our revenue stream that we know we could, what a 1 or 2% increase in our operational costs, especially with what fixed costs could do to us, that's just going to be, that could be ugly. That really could be ugly. It's hard enough. So keeping a reasonably, trying to be conservative without being draconian. Again, it's an art form as much as a science. And of course, again, Jack Pistorino and Sue and Sonia, they have to, I got to be honest with you, they have to kind of keep me at bay because, I'm looking for ways to spend, to fulfill the needs of, so they have to deal with me, and I have to sometimes say, okay, especially with Jack, a new growth. Oh, yes, Jack, yeah, you're right, okay. So,
Barbara?
Oh, no.
no, I mean, this is
So
the.
then-
No, I was just
This is
asking,
nuts and bolts.
the meal
This is
tax,
it.
just because I
Yep.
think that's lots of times one of the purse trends,
Yep.
people start to stop
Well,
going out to
you're
eat,
right, these are
and go.
these are economic indicators,
You add in the
absolutely.
motivate, the excise tax.
They're all economic
that to
indicators of some
trend down,
sort.
then,
Yep.
but that's not exactly the case here. It's
Right.
Yeah.
more of
Just
that it's a
projection.
better projection based
Yeah.
on, because we haven't had that. How many years are we going on having that?
Before my time. Which
four.
one, the meals tax?
Yeah.
Meals
Before my
tax.
time, so
Yeah.
just
Meals
before my
tax
time, I
was,
think.
I think, just barely before your.
Yeah, so maybe,
Yeah.
Might have
it might have been
just-
just 4 years
just
ago then.
started.
Yeah.
So we have a
5
little
years
bit more
ago.
data,
Yeah.
So,
having about 4 years of it, so that's probably just a closer number as opposed to people not going out to eat.
yeah.
Right.
So then the other question that I have, and I believe this is at the bottom in the free cash section, is that the money that we have talked about to seed the first year of full-day kindergarten?
Yes. That is contemplated in
that
the
is where
spending
it's-
plan.
That is where it's tracked, essentially.
Where?
Wi-
You look down at the bottom here on
Yep, got it.
the free cash.
That is correct. That is.
I gotcha.
This 550 includes 450 for that, as well as the other 100,000 is,
The last three articles on the bottom of your list, there's a number 9, 13.
okay, it includes,
Separate
okay,
articles within the warrant, and you appropriate that amount.
okay. So it's for,
Warrant articles and
okay. All right, so Articles 9, 13, 15, and then the budget article, to supplement the budget article.
Right.
Okay. Understood. That's how it's formatted.
Article 14, there's no actual, like, cost associated with that? That's normal, right? That it's just a
Correct.
conversation to try to do something?
Article 14 is,
so we'll
Sorry.
go through each of the articles.
I thought we were literally there. Sorry, I thought I just heard somebody say 13.
Yeah.
It was
we're talking
mentioned
about
because
this
of
sheet.
the,
Oh.
if you look at the bottom of the
I gotcha.
cover sheet,
We're still on the first page,
I'm trying to get,
so right here.
okay. Any other questions before we move to the special town meeting warrant? Again, we do have the updated, not just the cover sheet, we have the updated line by line. We can all kind of take our fine tooth comb out over the week and come back with any questions that we might have next week. We'll have our bigger in-depth discussion then, so.
yeah, and certainly I expect within a day or two, I'll have the police number for both the special and for the FY19 needs. That's what I expect any day now, so.
And is that a 3-year agreement?
That is actually, that is actually a 4-year agreement, although technically it expires this June 30th, but the,
So 4 years
but the,
including
but the
this year.
funding requirement that goes into FY19 is obviously important for the budget process. Gets us back to day one, though.
So 3 years forward.
3 years, it's actually, technically, the agreement concludes this coming June 30th. But like I said, the money that's required it obviously, it has an expense to it that has to be built into the FY19 budget. So, before we start negotiating again.
always trying to make things simple.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying, yeah.
No, not you.
Okay, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Let's move on to the special town meeting warrant. Article number 1, to vote to transfer available funds, a sum of money to pay unpaid bills, $5,220.44 from unemployment.
Yeah, and that's actually, from last year's, a bill that came in late from last fiscal year from the unemployment line, and there's sufficient funding in the current year's unemployment line to handle it, but as a unpaid bill from last year, it requires authorization from town meeting, so.
And it was
Doesn't-
unemployment related?
It was, yes, it was just a late bill for the same purpose, but just requires authorization.
And
Unpaid bills from prior fiscal years require
Yeah.
town meeting approval, that's the state
Sure.
law.
And is there a specific time period in which those need to be in, or is it just those things can be submitted and then you guys have to just deal with it?
Yeah. Well,
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stinks.
When we actually get the bill,
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
from
it
the
stinks.
previous year's budget,
Yep.
the line item no longer exists.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that, it's tough to budget,
Yeah.
so.
yeah, so. You would think the Commonwealth of Massachusetts would get their bills out on time. But- And understand our fiscal years.
Why would you think that?
I just, seeing where they make the laws that demand it, I would think so, but,
They pay the full
yeah, so. I don't know.
Chapter 70 and the other ones,
So,
right?
So,
could say a lot of things right now, but they might be inappropriate, so,
you'd get in more trouble than.
exactly, so.
Article 2, vote to transfer $60,000 for the detail work
Yes,
account pursuant to
yes.
reimburse employees who work private detail projects or take other action. I think that should say relative.
Yes, this is actually a piece of the police contract that we just ratified. This is essentially not a financial issue. Currently, what happens is that on private details, police officers don't get paid until the private company pays, which could take a long time. This creates a revolving fund that the officers are paid in a timely manner by the town, and then the private detail money goes into the revolving fund to supplement what was paid out already. So this is
Will
actually
this-
rather typical in other communities. It's just not the way Abington has conducted business.
Will this be in
Yes.
the list of revolving accounts in the annual?
Okay, all right, get technical with me, Sue. You know, don't bring a town accountant to a discussion. Okay.
So we need to put, because to transfer, that's, I
not
was
a
looking
revolving
at
fund.
revolving, but, so, no, it didn't, that's why, so we would need to start that off with 60,000.
Yes.
Unlike a, yeah.
And, but this is coming out of a fund that money that's already like within his budget that handles this, but it's
Yeah,
gonna
we're just
become this is not
separating it
technically a
to-
revolving fund, but it's an account that, under the Mass General Law, that works like a revolving fund, but it's it's an authorization within the general laws that actually provides for this type of a, mechanism.
How long does it take y'all to get paid?
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm sorry, well, it would depend, if you have a contractor who's essentially, just hard to get money out of, I mean, I don't know, it could
I
take,
think Chief
could take a month,
Majinski
could take 2 months.
explained this when he was here.
So-
I think he explained it
Yeah.
is difficult for them to get paid and actually pay his guys, and I guess that's sort of why this was created.
So realistically, sometimes the department does have to chase down vendors, and, I mean, they eventually get their money almost universally, but the officers sometimes would have to wait weeks, presumably months, maybe. I don't know that it's always that bad, but sometimes it may be an untenable amount of time for somebody that has worked to get paid, and this solves that problem. So it's more of a good faith effort, something we did negotiate in good faith to set up a fund so that people can get
Right.
paid in a timely manner.
But
So
you would think that the
Right.
town could
So
use
that's-
more draconian methods to get the money.
seems, well.
I'm
well,
serious.
I'm good with that,
that's-
Peter.
Well, I don't want to suggest that law enforcement would do
I'm just saying,
anything
if you're the
that's-
police department and you're
Yeah,
having
it's-
a hard time getting paid, then I don't
No,
think
all
any
I'm
methods
saying
that you use
is
are
if-
probably gonna make a whole lot of
Well,
difference.
I think
You know.
what we would suggest is that sometimes large companies have bureaucracy that can be
Red
difficult
tape
to.
and-
Yes.
they don't,
We'll leave it at that.
Rick, it might, it
they
might be
may
able
not be getting
to,
paid for the project until,
it might be able to be solved.
Well, sometimes subcontractors, contractors are dealing with subcontractors, and there's a flow,
they
and
have
it's
to
just,
turn, turn in that
that's all.
receipt to
It might be able to be
this
solved in the beginning by saying, with this contract, you agree to pay within a day or 2 days, whatever it is. Again, I don't know where these contracts are coming from and who's doing them. It might, but it could probably be solved right in the beginning.
Yeah, well, again, keep in mind, the officers sometimes might get paid, they get called, with the last minute. It's not necessarily a contract between the police department and and,
A builder or.
yeah, exactly. It's not like the town has it's not
be
like the
National
school, it's not like
Grid.
the school contract where we have where the town has an encompassing contract with a particular vendor, so.
National Grid
so-
might have an emergency and
Yeah.
they need a
I understand.
detail. and
So
then-
this basically solves, a nuisance issue. This isn't like a huge problem, but it is a nuisance for police officers who
And
have
if
to
you-
wait a
if-
long
if
time to
you-
get paid
If you're a
sometimes.
police officer and you work a detail and you don't know when you're gonna get paid for it,
Well,
that
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
be rather annoying.
yeah, so,
Anybody, if you're anybody, you work and you don't know when you're gonna get paid, I mean,
yeah,
Nobody's gonna.
exactly. So it's.
I can't imagine it happening, so it's one of
No.
those banana things.
Well, I think one of the fundamental tenets of, our society, you work, you should get paid in a reasonably timely manner, and, I don't want to suggest it's a huge problem, but it's
It's something.
enough of an issue that,
Something we
that
can
state
fix.
law contemplates it and has set up a specific law to deal with it.
Right.
And this is just us requesting that the town accept this law, and set up this account on behalf of, our department, so that's all.
Thanks.
So,
Any other questions on Article 2? Article 3, transfer from
Yes.
the variable funds,
right, and unfortunately,
bargaining police.
you're not in a position to really do anything with this tonight until I get you the numbers to work with, as I said, in the next few days, so. But as I mentioned, both the union and the selectmen have now both ratified the memorandum of agreement between the parties, so.
Very good. Article 4,
Yes, and,
transfer 93,732 from certified free cash to cover snow and ice.
yes, and, oh, sure, now Sue's leaving. She's gonna- Let me try to explain this now.
She got a really bad cough right at that exact moment.
Right, this number, the snow over expenditure is approximately $450,000.
I was gonna say, geez, did we
And what,
only?
and what the town accountant is recommending, just essentially for administrative ease, is using about 90, using this amount in free cash, using the rest of the free cash between the items you saw for the,
Can you go-
the school, the capital plan,
Articles.
and raising, and essentially putting the rest as an over expenditure on the recap sheet, because it's only one journal entry for her. It's still the same bottom line. It doesn't make a difference in terms of the bottom line. It's just a matter of formatting, so essentially raising and appropriating the remainder instead of using free cash. Doesn't change the bottom line. It's-
Raising and appropriating from,
Well, just, please, again, taxation.
we're gonna use
Yes.
through our,
Where it's essentially a matter of how you, what their funding source is. It's not, instead of, the difference is we would, instead of using 450 in free cash and going through all the other items and raising and appropriating X amount for all the
Right,
just
right.
separate items on the recap, on the, the capital
article,
plan,
yeah.
on, her preference is simply to use 93,000 in free cash and raise and appropriate the remainder of the snow overdraft on the, in the next year's budget, which actually goes on the recap sheet, because by state law. It's really just a matter of
so
administrative
what's that
ease.
number, though?
The
It's
remainder of the snow
93,700.
overdraft, that would be just raised and appropriated, with 450,000 minus.
This is, just to clarify, this is not the 2017, 2018
Okay,
winter
just,
snow and ice removal. This is the previous.
This
year,
is what was
2016,
overexpended from this
2017.
current year.
This
Oh,
year.
This is
This
this
is,
current year.
this is the year we just
Okay.
finished up.
Ooh,
That's,
said finished up.
Oh, my God, Greg,
Uh-oh.
if I jinxed us again.
What is that I see out there?
Oh, I know, my streak has not been good. I apologize. I apologize, so. I know. The rainy season, yes, so it's really, I tried my best, Sue, to explain that this is administrative ease for you. Instead of raising and appropriating
Because
all
usually we
these
see a
single
bunch of
items.
different, it's usually a list of
Yes.
7 or 8 different places that we're
Yeah,
transferring
so
funds
it's
from
purely
this account to
just much
to no deficit,
simpler,
transferring funds.
from an accounting standpoint, et cetera, to raise and appropriate the balance of the snow deficit and use free cash and against, for our capital plan instead of raising and appropriating all these little tiny items. So, bottom line is exactly the same, exactly the same.
Questions?
And yes, on the back, that's right.
Article 5. Transfer $4,500 to cover the costs estimated for the fire department to provide fire emergency medical details associated with the town fireworks display. Beyond Abington celebrates.
Yes, the committee has requested this. The fire chief, late in the fiscal year, as you know, this would be later in June. He chief wasn't ready to commit how much funds he might have available to this. Obviously would be a detail event for the fire department. And he just wasn't sure at this stage, so he suggested perhaps the committee ask for some funding. So,
They have the fireworks display this year, it'll be in June, so that's
yeah,
why it's on the
that's
special.
right, so before the end of the fiscal year, so the committee took his advice,
Mhm.
and we'll be seeking a transfer of funds from where the town accountant will be very pleased to scour the books, and we'll have some, probably from,
They feel they're in good shape at this point to have fireworks.
I don't, they're fundraising now, they're hopeful.
Very
because
expensive.
as you know, it's a
Yeah,
private
very, very
fundraising
Whether that
event
happens this
to,
year or not is still,
yeah, so,
they're trying their hardest,
And so if that doesn't happen, then
This
then we don't need the
Then it
article.
won't.
then we,
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, so,
it can't be used differently.
it can,
Right.
absolutely,
Right.
exactly.
right.
No event, no expenditure. So if there is a transfer and there's no event, it would be closed out to free cash.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or closed out to fund balance, I guess, yeah. I don't know the jargon, so. And Articles 6 and 7, presumably, there would not be a transfer to stabilization of the OPEB trust fund if we're going to be, using our free cash to seed the kindergarten program this year, if that's, and again, as you know, that's certainly our recommendation, that this would be the year to do it. From what the confidence we have in what the school administration has learned from Department of Ed, as well as a private consultant. I'm sorry, his name, what's the gentleman's name that we, Mark Abrams, who's kind of the private sector expert on school, Chapter 70 school reimbursements, that FY '20, where we would stand with regard to a Chapter 70 reimbursement, if we do indeed put money towards the program this year, that our chapter, what we would invest in free cash would come back to us almost to probably within 50,000 of what we invest would come back to us. So again, I call it a little bit of a leap of faith. Well, once again, it's why we were trying to be very conservative with our revenue estimates too. So, but as you know, wouldn't leave us capacity to fund our savings accounts this year. So Articles 6 and 7 would not, we wouldn't be able to, we'd have to would be passing over those if that was the case.
I can't remember if you gave us this already. Do we have the balances of those accounts?
The stabilization.
OPEB.
I know stabilization's about 1.4 and change, I think. I don't know the exact number, but OPEB, I can't remember. somewhere close on stabilization?
I don't know. Yeah, I would not
Look at
say,
that. Sounds right. I think it is.
go downstairs and get
I
it.
don't know about.
That's all right, no, I don't, sure, an email would be
You can
fine.
get it to us, it's not,
to
yeah.
us.
So you know how good my memory is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's renowned for being extremely,
This is your snow forecasting.
yeah, yeah. Hope it's better than my rain forecasting, yeah.
Just a question, just because I haven't been in, the $4,500 for the fire thing, if they don't end up doing it, what happens to the money? It just ends up going back?
Yeah, it just flows back to the general fund and
Okay.
closed out at the end of the year. Eventually becomes subsequent years free cash, part of that calculation.
Yep.
So,
And could they earmark it for something else, if something else came up,
No.
like
No.
medical devices, or?
No,
No.
It's not for the fire department, it's for the
Yeah, it's
for the
committee, the
fireworks.
Abington Celebrates
I gotcha.
Committee. They're asking for the
Yeah.
money to pay the fire department.
I understand.
But then if they don't have, if they
Right.
aren't able to get enough funds to have the
Yep.
fireworks,
I-
then
no,
Yep, I
but
completely
an
agree.
article like that is essentially an absolute earmark. It cannot be used for anything
Yep,
else.
thanks.
And it can stay in that article too for years and
Yes.
still be used at a future date.
Oh, wow.
It stays
Well-
there,
We had
like,
the
Yeah, but I would think that,
caravan to
well,
us
not this particular
No,
article, but that's a
not
not
that-
bad
that
example for
article,
this, but
yeah.
another
on
article.
another article.
right, but
that
this
you
would
have.
get, if this isn't used, it would get closed out
particular
at
one
the
would get
end of
closed
June
out.
and become.
But like the elevator.
Sure.
That stays in an article till
Sure.
they're able to get to it. It doesn't close out, it stays in that
Sure.
article till you close it out, if it's no longer
Right.
needed.
So,
Yeah. So they don't automatically all go away, but this one would because there's no
Mhm.
event.
Right.
and,
Any
well,
other questions on the special before we move on to the annual town meeting? Right. Annual town meeting? Article 1 is the budget. We've talked about that already.
yes.
Article 2 is the town clerk's salary line item that we see each year.
Yes.
We talked about that when the town clerk was here. Does anyone have any questions on that? Article 3 is free cash capital, or capital in general, not just free cash.
Yes, and,
So, question from me on this one, for the items that are looking to be paid for out of free cash, where we are looking to seed the full-day kindergarten, obviously, we are limited in what else we would be able to spend for free cash. Are we looking to spend all of the rest of free cash on the capital plan here, or are we?
this would exhaust our free cash. This, yes. This
Including
would,
that
yes.
article in the special. That
Yes.
kills it.
And I will say, what you see here is really, after meeting with department heads and, you know, including our school administration and really beating up what was real priorities and really getting consensus, which is not always easy to do, but, so once again, little bit of give and take and a good, again, consensus among department heads as to what may have to wait till next year, so.
Is the fiber optic cables for police and school, is that to increase the quality and
In the security,
of the cameras from the high school to the police station, right?
exactly, yes, exactly.
So the monies from the enterprise funds are not part of free cash, right?
No, exactly, from there down, that's all water receipts, correct, and sewer department, et cetera,
So down to the municipal school complex, it's
correct,
free cash and the rest is the enterprise.
that is correct.
Can somebody just, the fiber optic thing, why wouldn't that be part of the school building
Yeah, I'm
stuff?
just
That was
wondering
actually a
that.
question I was
Oh,
gonna raise, is
sorry.
that something that
Yeah,
could
that's-
potentially be?
That's not,
Considered
that's
part.
not within the scope of the school
scope of-
project.
Has to
What's
be
allowed.
educational, there's a
It's just
certain
not,
amount of,
Yeah.
it has to be like for the students, like, I
It's
think
been, well,
the-
it's been asked and answered through MSBA,
So safety?
been asked.
No?
No, but the scope of the amount, the money that they can use on the different items in the new school,
Yeah, and this is off property. Most of this is off property. This isn't within the
actual
school
building.
campus, so to
Sure.
speak. That's part of the, and it wasn't within the submission, at this point now, a few years ago with regard to the construction of the facility. This was a part of, and again, this isn't necessarily on premises. A lot of this is off premises work, running fiber optic cable, so.
Because I'm not up on this stuff, what would those cables actually be doing?
This would be increasing, enhancing the communication and the ability for the police department to monitor the activities going on inside, within the building and on the campus.
They have like all
It's
those
just-
cameras that they have in the new
Yes.
school, but
So
the
it's a
quality of
closed
the.
network.
Yeah, it's so, yeah.
In a room dedicated over at the high school with all the cameras in one area, so somebody's able to see everything. It's
So the
update-
stuff in the building is updated, it's
Mhm.
just everything outside.
It's
the
getting the
building.
feed,
Well-
getting the feed from the school to the
That's a good-
police department,
Yeah,
And then-
that's exactly right.
police building.
That's
Yep.
correct.
Is that an oversight? Like, meaning they just didn't think of doing that in the
Yeah,
beginning? Or is this just something happened to
the-
where new security
no,
measures need to be in place?
The
or-
quality is not what they had hoped it would be,
Yeah.
and, again, I don't profess to be
Yeah, I don't either.
of the technical,
I know that when the police
Capacity
chief was
to
here
deliver
too,
the
he had
message.
said that there's only certain cameras that they're able to access from the, and that they wanted to increase the ability to
All of them.
be able to access
and
all of
the
the cameras.
infrastructure
and-
isn't
that.
what they, they need to replace the infrastructure to do it the way they need to do it. Yeah.
I got a question, the Revolutionary War Monument,
Yes.
what's that?
This is the so-called
Flagpole.
Cedra movement out here that was struck by a vehicle
Last
several
summer,
months back.
from a car accident.
And what happened to going after the automobile company?
Well, we have an insurance settlement that isn't nearly enough now based upon some of the quotes we have. There is a court proceeding coming up, which actually Sue will be attending in the next, we are trying to get additional recovery. If we're able to do that, and again, this isn't going to culminate though before town
Okay,
meeting.
I just-
But the other thing too is that, the other concern we have is to, right now, the flagpole that was out there wasn't lit. If we're going to replace that flagpole, it needs to be lit. There needs to be some infrastructure to light the pole, or else we're not gonna replace the flagpole. And quite frankly, I'm not putting up a flagpole that's not lit, and I'm not putting up a flagpole at that monument, Revolutionary War soldiers. So, hopefully, there'll be no need to spend any or all of those funds, but it's too early to tell. So again, our goal is to have to spend very little or any of that money, but, once again, this is again, the best laid plans, but a couple of these issues are more timely than the other issues that have been pending. But it's an excellent question under the,
And the infield pro line stripper,
yeah, that's, again,
community
it's been on,
preservation,
no, it's a maintenance,
Piece of
it's maintenance.
maintenance, okay.
Maintenance, yeah.
Just ask.
Again, that's been on the list for a couple of years, and unfortunately, in light of some of these other things that have come up, we had hoped to get another sidewalk plow this year, for instance. That's about $125,000 expenditure. We have three, another one would have been, we'd like to replace one or make one limp along a little longer and have one additional one in the stable. So that's pushed back another year at this stage.
Just that we hope for a generator at Town Hall, but we're pushing that back
Yeah,
to
you know,
FY '20.
the 2 fire station
Forward.
generators are in tough shape, and those have to be replaced.
Were they able to use the Bobcat to plow the sidewalks a little bit that they purchased the school? Because didn't they say they got that to do that?
Yeah.
So did they use it?
Well, the Bobcat's used for everything, including that, no question
So
about
they
that.
used it
Yes.
for that, okay.
But obviously, there's a lot of sidewalks, and, the three sidewalk plows they have now are, I don't know the dates, but
They're old.
it's been a long time, since they've, so, and that, again, that's one of those items that's been on the capital list for a long time. And as you can see, some of these between, say, the Glenowitz Way, the municipal complex, the opportunity that has come up to put those utilities underground wasn't anticipated like a couple years ago. The Cedra Monument, whether we have to spend those funds or not, an example of items that simply weren't anticipated that have, pushed some of these things aside that have kind of been planned for a period of time. And, but unfortunately, you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of these funds won't have to be spent and can be put to other uses in a future date, but
And the other thing to mention too is this was printed before the documents were finalized, so what should be on here, which will be on here the next time you'll see, is the HVAC for the town hall for the 40,000. It's in the calculation, you'll see it on this sheet.
I'm sorry, Dory.
Yeah,
Good,
we
that's a
just,
thank you.
yeah,
that-
so it's in the calculation and it'll be.
For town hall?
For town hall, it'll be 40,000 for HVAC.
Yeah,
It's,
I'm
they
sorry.
said this was printed
Yeah, you missed that.
before.
Did you miss that?
Well,
I'm sorry.
And it's,
Yeah, the
so
H,
that's-
yeah,
you'll see it on
the,
the back page
yeah,
of
the
summary
library
sheet.
was
and it's
replaced
the
last
free
year.
cash.
It's free cash, 40,000.
Yeah,
And it'll be on the next
yeah,
version.
that has conked out, so we can't adjust the system anymore. The computer system is gone. So
Yeah.
Wayne can do everything, but not without a system that doesn't, the computer system that no longer works. So the heat has to be manually adjusted, which defeats the entire purpose and effectively costs money. It doesn't have to be spent. It's, so, I'm sorry. Okay, continue.
Back to the one that Peter brought up, what exactly is an infield pro-line stripper?
Striper.
Striper.
The line striper.
Stripe.
You actually had me intrigued by that.
That's what,
I think that
I think
costs a
that
little
was
bit
my
more.
confusion.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford
is
that one.
Yeah, yeah,
We
that's
had to
right.
go with the
What was
striper.
stripping
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
So-
That's a lot.
We tried, but we couldn't
Fields.
afford
You
it.
want lines on your field.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Barbara. Thank you.
Football fields, baseball fields, striper.
Stripe.
Yeah, that is 1P, correct?
Two Ps, yeah.
I just read it wrong.
But no, it's a great question. Not even the stripper striper, but
We're done with this one.
no, I want to keep going.
This is Greg's wheelhouse.
This is. Is it, I mean, obviously it's some big piece of machinery.
No, 25,000.
I remember as a kid,
I was gonna say, I
Relative-
I was
remember,
gonna say, I remember like the little push things with the chalk.
literally that's what I'm thinking
Yeah,
of, and I'm like,
I
wow,
mean,
they are
no,
getting a nice,
It's not one of those.
All right.
I know what you're talking about.
That's what we
I
had.
remember volunteering.
yeah, that.
No,
Dad had the chalk and they would
Yeah.
push it.
I don't, I'm not going to speak for Mr. Stone, but it's not,
I got
it's
you.
not, you don't fill it up and push it up the line like
I
that. That's not
yeah.
what you do.
I was like, wow, it's gotta be a nice one.
Don't wanna.
It's a pro line.
So, no, again, this has been one of those that's been on the list for many years and has, come to the forefront.
the fire department generators, I'm assuming those are replacing existing
They are,
generators?
yes, that's right. The infrastructure's in place, they just need to be replaced, and these are essential. Especially this last year with the storms that we've had, the chief was very concerned, crossing his fingers that his stations were going to make it through.
The existing sketchy generators, are we going to repurpose them elsewhere where we currently don't have generators?
That is a good question we will pose to the chief. Based upon his description of how nervous he was as to their ability to get through this past season, I'm skeptical that they have an afterlife, but it's a very good question. We will ask him.
Yeah,
It's
my
possible
only
with
thought
additional
is if we
maintenance, they
have
could be.
A building that does not have
Yep.
a generator.
Whether they could be, one could be
They'd be
repurposed
better
for
than
town
One
hall.
nothing.
one where
It's
we're
possible.
crossing our fingers with it is better than
It's
nothing.
possible.
So,
Yeah.
It's a good question we
Yeah.
will pose. Obviously, the needs of town hall are significantly less than an emergency facility, for example. Yes. You will make sure that he gets asked that question.
people
Okay,
aren't
thank you, Dory.
breaking down the door of town hall when there's.
No, the only thing with town hall would obviously be the servers, and
The servers.
that's the only thing of any critical nature here would be.
I hate to keep going back to it, but can you find out what that is?
What's that?
The infield pro line? Can
I
you
know, I just
find
like
out?
Yes,
Googled it and I
absolutely.
found ones for
I
$800.
literally just did too, and
Yeah, and they're
I put the
like-
word best.
Yeah, me too, and
We will,
$800.
no, we will.
So it must be something
There's
that
gotta
I'm
be
not
something-
typing in
exactly.
here, right? Because like what I'm
Well,
finding is
yes,
not,
this is
it's
a-
gotta be something
the-
better than that.
The
I'm
DPW
guessing.
superintendent will be.
There's got to be a different thing,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, because when I looked it up, I was like,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
I found like $800 ones.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Did you
Not a
put
problem.
commercial?
yes.
But why did
Not a problem.
Yeah, it's got to be something else. It must be a bigger thing associated or multiple ones or something.
You got it.
Sure.
like
It's
a
gotta be
ride-on?
something else, because this is.
This would be a very pleasant mistake for us.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
No, I know, that's why I'm,
Don't get
Right,
me
so you
wrong.
can
I
just-
think it's a ride-on thing.
Yes, yes, it's a,
I just looked at one, a brand new ride on one.
Like you ride on, so you can do like the whole football field.
this is, no,
Ride
this is,
on.
Yeah, but I mean, do we have, so I mean, just if we're like looking at funds, do we have to have that one, or can we have a cheaper one?
I think that's why he's gonna do a
Yeah, we need
little,
to
like,
figure out
look
what this
into
thing
it and
is, because like
then,
what I'm looking up is.
no, and
not
again,
even-
keep in mind, this is about an extremely small staff doing a lot of fields for a very, very long, for many, many years. So, but once again, we'll ask the question.
find
No, it's an excellent question. We'll make sure that you're informed from our DPW, not
What
from
this is.
bureaucrats like me.
I remember
Can't
it
answer
being
your
a
question.
labor-intense process, though.
Yeah.
but it's incredibly difficult to do a football field.
Because that you've got to also
Right.
Has to
mow
be
all the
precise,
lawns
yeah,
and,
too.
and fields and,
advertised here as parking lot striping machine, so he could be looking for that,
Right,
not the
right,
lawn machine.
right. But once again, let's
Yeah.
just ask the question
find
so
out.
we don't, right, again, this is, yeah.
Appreciate that.
No, not
There's
a,
like a mid-range one.
not a problem.
Any other,
Again, you're looking
Capital
for a
item
piece of capital
questions.
equipment that's gonna last a long time.
Right.
And be, so,
No, because they wouldn't need it for the turf fields, right? Because that's just paint.
They'd
No.
still have to, well, I think they would still have to line the turf fields
But
at
it's
some
already
point.
lined.
yeah.
they're,
I guess
Oh,
when it
maybe they
comes
don't fade,
off-
yeah.
Once again,
I don't know.
at least in theory, the turf, I believe.
Right, would it need to be like relined?
yeah,
turf would be
I have,
replaced
I don't know.
before the need for the lines to be redone,
yeah,
Yeah.
I believe.
once again, we shall ask Mr. Stone
Thank you.
instead of,
Do we have other questions on the capital items? I know we went over the water department ones with the water department. So we should probably have less questions there. They're all coming from the water undesignated fund. Similar for the sewer, I would assume.
yes.
Procurement people, I've seen just a couple places that were buying heavy-duty truck. Is there any way to like,
We did.
maybe everybody's already doing it, but go in together to maybe get a better deal? Something outside the box a little bit? Because I've seen it in a couple different places. Might not save $1, I don't know.
Yeah, well, these are all purchased off either statewide or countywide.
Yeah, so you probably
bids.
can't do much.
Yeah, so, well, they're all massive group,
So there's
All right,
a way to
good.
get like
yeah,
a
bids.
slightly
So it's-
used one that was a little bit cheaper, but better than the 1993. To get
Well,
a truck that's better than nothing or no? You know what I mean?
yeah, well, like I said, what happens is, like I
So
said,
that's-
there are, these massive equipment bids, through the Plymouth County, or we participate in a SURSIG, Southeastern Regional Services Group, that does group bids or statewide bids. So you have a chance to look at, which group bid is most advantageous for the exact piece of equipment that meets their needs. So that's usually the how it's, how
So
it's
you
done.
don't just
So you
like go to the Ford dealership and be like, I
no,
want this car.
no,
Okay.
no, because, no, you don't do that, so, you get the economies of scale for, which economy of scale works best for the exact equipment you're looking for,
Okay.
so.
That's a good question, because a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
They think you just go.
Yeah, no, I didn't know where they got
No,
these
oh, goodness,
cars from.
no,
Yeah,
no,
because I'm
all
like,
that-
why not just like go to a different dealership?
All that work is already done for you, you get, the municipal discounts or state discounts.
Okay, yeah, that's what I didn't know.
Any others on capital? All right. Article 4 is revolving funds. Are there any changes or new funds this year? Some last year. I don't know if we have anything different this year.
Just the building department. and
Yeah, just
revolving
the only
fund.
thing that was
I don't-
added here was at the request of the Board of Selectmen, that, the commentary that in the building department, that it was added specifically because there was an increase in number, but it was specifically added that, in archiving of documents, so that it was clear that the increase was for the, could be used, or was used for the archiving of documents.
So is that to, is that a new position?
No, that's for
No,
a
they're
service.
just
Going to.
Service.
For service
Okay, the
contract.
service.
Yeah.
It's a one-time service contract for scanning and archiving, basically for, obviously for the compilation of documents in a, system and
Stuff that can't be done
space saving,
in-house.
space
Right.
saving
Yeah,
too,
digitizing.
digitizing maps and documents, et cetera, so.
And we
So that-
wanted to do that out of the revolving fund. And
Correct.
So is that an
Not-
increase in the
not as a
revolving
separate-
fund from
Yes.
Yes.
what to what?
It was
I believe it was
80.
80
Okay.
Yes.
previously.
Right. And the funds
What?
are available for that within the revolving fund this
No,
year.
it doesn't come out of the general fund.
Yes.
Man,
Building permits have generated enough fees, enough revenue to pay for this.
trying for everybody not to hate me here, but, so we're paying $100,000 for somebody to archive?
No.
No,
So
no.
that's, yeah.
I'm trying
that's
to look
a good
at it
thing.
here.
So
Explain
the
that
re-
revolving.
So just quickly to explain the revolving funds. Revolving funds, the numbers that you see on here is the cap. That's the limit of what can go into that fund.
Okay.
What can be
Or
spent?
what can be spent
spent.
out of that fund in a specific year, a specific fiscal year. So even if the building department has $2 million in that fund, and this is just total hypothetical, they're not
Correct.
actually gonna have $2 million in that fund. Even if they have 2 million, the 135 is the max they can spend out of that. And it's, the receipts come into the fund and they spend out of it for the purposes that the fund is designated for. It's not.
So
for
usually the
other
receipts
purposes.
are like, the,
Permits and
For the
fees.
building.
right, so the
permits.
building permits, when you pull a building permit, that money from that permit will go into that revolving fund so that they can pay the wiring inspector and the plumbing inspector and the gas inspector. But they can only spend
135.
the 135.
Yep, okay.
But
And
it's
there-
an
and it's-
increase, so
yeah, the
that's what I was
increase-
asking.
the
Formerly
increase-
80,000, this year it's been increased, we're seeking an increase so they can pay for an archiving project, a records archiving project. So it doesn't have to come out
With
of,
their own
it
funding.
doesn't have to
Yep.
come out
Source.
of,
I understand.
general fund.
And are we
Yeah.
expecting that the archiving project will be done within 1 year?
We
Yeah.
certainly hope.
And so we would
That's-
expect that at this time next year, we'd be dropping that back down.
yeah, Certainly hope so, hell,
Yeah.
heck, yeah, I'm sure. That's certainly our intent.
Revolving funds can be controversial too, because depending on, your views about them.
Yeah, sure.
Because you might have a revolving fund in one department and a different department might not have a revolving fund. So it can be kind of,
Some departments don't appreciate the fact that other departments have revolving funds and the ability, but.
Or
mass-
just people
but
in
mass
general
But
that,
mass
you know-
general laws are, dictate what revolving funds are allowed, and that's what it is. We can't just invent revolving funds
I'm just saying,
where
it's,
they're not available.
people fall on different lines.
Yeah,
sometimes
sure.
With how they feel about that, so.
Any other questions on the revolving funds? Article 5, transfer available funds for the collective bargaining agreements that are not yet
Yeah,
settled.
and
I'm assuming
ca-
we'll get
Can I
details
suggest
if those are settled.
maybe this be updated to say to raise and appropriate or transfer available funds? Would that be more appropriate language? I ask you and the town accountant. Would that be more appropriate? Okay, that might be good for a special town meeting warrant, because where you only have the opportunity to transfer funds. That might be,
So would you pull this article off of and put it into the special, you mean?
no, but I think the
Add
language
raise and
on Article 5 should be
appropriate.
raised
Okay.
and
Yeah.
appropriate
It's more
or transfer
appropriate.
More
available.
appropriate for the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Good
Okay.
point.
Sure. Every once in a while,
I
Dora.
know.
Every once in a while.
Nicely done.
Once a week.
Huh?
Once a week, I get to come.
Any questions there? Article 6. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer funds, 14,000 for student transportation. This is one that we see every year, correct?
Correct,
This is-
Exactly.
correct, yes.
Yep.
This is, we talked about this with the school department. It's district students going to out-of-district schools like Norfolk Aggie.
That is correct, yes.
And it's state law, we're required to pay. This is just, it needs its own article.
Yes.
So then what would happen if that was voted down at town meeting? Just wondering.
I don't,
Yeah, we'd have to find the money somewhere.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what's, what,
We have to pay it. It's a bill that we get.
yeah. Never seen it happen though, Lisa, but it's a good question. Yeah, yeah, I guess,
Say they did, then
yeah,
what?
just guess they just.
We'll take it out of your finance committee salary.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you that one.
It's a good question. For things like that, why are they even in there? If they have to be funded, why does it need a vote? Why is there any waste of time?
Correct me if I'm wrong, and this, I think that's a question that I asked when I was newer on the
Yeah.
committee, and I think, if I remember correctly, the answer is the specific wording of the law from the state that required us to fund it requires it to be approved by the town. Is that
I,
It could be
Correct.
in a budget somewhere, but I think
Yeah.
it was pulled out from, speaking of Felicia, it was pulled out to show that this is a requirement that, they have no choice to pay, so to speak. It's not regular school transportation
Right.
here, it's an excess transportation, so they wanted to show that it's not in their regular transportation budget.
I know in my prior histories in other communities, this was also isolated as warrant articles too. I think it's just customary, probably for the same reason, but again, whether it has to be, may be a question for debate, but be that as it may.
Any other questions on that before we moved on? Article 7 is the CPA. And we have them here, and we went over their spending and the things that they were looking for. Does anyone have any leftover questions on the CPA?
What would happen if the town said no? Just asking.
They wouldn't spend any of it.
They couldn't spend any of it?
Yeah, it
Okay,
would all
just
stay-
asking.
it would all stay in the fund and go to the next year's.
So that at the town meeting, they could change everything.
Recommend
Yes.
I know you
Good
didn't,
catch.
yeah, I know you didn't do it.
No,
Then
good catch.
You would have to change the article to at least reserve the 10% for each of the 3 categories.
That you have to give
Yes.
money to.
Right. Okay. It just,
Do we have a copy of that report? Like, is it a,
Next page.
Yeah, yes.
I was a little,
just making sure Rick was awake.
no,
Yeah.
I was a little thrown off by that at first, because usually the preservation committee would be after the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it looks like it's
So
the
I
end
thought
of the article.
I thought it was
That's what I
empty
thought.
because of the page break, and then I turned and was like, oh, there it is. So. Any other questions there?
Well, can we go over that?
We can.
Okay.
And if memory serves me correctly, it's what we went over with them when they were here.
Mhm, yes, there's no changes.
Yeah. Although there may be a spelling
was not
update.
here.
Barbara was not here for that.
Oh, okay.
I'm just looking really quick. You can,
Yeah.
you're.
The recommended
Take your
amount may be updated to be recommended.
Recommended.
Let's see what we can do.
The big item was the Riley track resurfacing.
The-
Right.
Just, is this a wish list, or is this,
No,
like,
this
we
is-
really need all of these things?
So, the way that the Community Preservation Act works is the town passed the act, which requires a committee to be set up. The committee then determines what they want to spend the money that they have available on for the year, with certain specific requirements of this percent needs to be spent on this.
And the
this
money
percent needs to
comes
go to that.
from-
And the money comes from the real estate tax. There's a percentage, I think.
See how they
is it
isolate
1.5.
specifically
Yep.
10%?
1.5% of your real estate tax goes to, specifically to the Community Preservation Act, with some percentage of match
From
from
the state.
the state that comes from real estate fees. And then, so they put forth, this is what we want to spend the money on in this fiscal year, to the town for the town to approve it. So it's
And it's like
kind
a
of,
board made up of.
it's kind of somewhere between a wish list and a, this is what we're doing,
Sure.
but the town has to approve it for them to actually be able to do it.
And is it, I've never been to the town thing, but is it something where that, they ask for, is it 350, no, it's 582, right?
So they're not asking, they actually have the
There
money.
I
we
have
all that
582, we want to spend 582.
No,
These things.
look at what
They
they're
have
carrying over.
582, they want to spend,
Like two something, because they're carrying over
I think,
money, see?
no, they have
the
nine.
They're
no,
not
the total
spent.
available funds is 938,600.
Huh,
Yeah, so they do a good job.
So,
that's great.
they're, part of what they are doing is putting money away towards looking at a larger project at some point in the future.
Sure.
So,
But I guess my question is it yes or no from the town?
so with
And not,
each-
I
Yeah.
want to take out this or that?
Well,
With each article at town meeting, there can be proposals to alter the article.
well, well,
Look into that.
Yeah, I don't know if you
because I
can-
think even if you don't approve this, they have to reserve.
Yeah, that's what
No, I
they
understand
said
that,
when they
but-
came here, that they
Oh,
had to do this.
I just
You
want to
need to
make
reserve
sure it's
percentage.
clear
Right,
at
right,
town
right. That was,
meeting
like, part of
that
the law.
it's presented either
remember
it's
them
yes or
saying
no, or
Even if they
there's a
don't use
third
it,
option, you
have
can
to put that
change,
percentage.
you know, something within
Yeah.
it.
yeah.
You could not approve a project if you wanted to. But I
Okay,
can look into it.
all right.
But I'm pretty sure that it works just like the budget. If you don't want something paid for, you can say, except for this in the capital.
So you could get up and propose on town floor, I would like to approve the proposed community preservation budget minus
Minus the
or
pickleball
striking.
or-
But you
Right.
couldn't
Chose that
propose
'cause
any
it's
new
left.
addition, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. Because it has to be vetted and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff, yeah.
Any other questions there?
I kind
Lisa?
of have one that,
Yep.
is there no plan to spruce up the War Memorial to the left of the Legion Building? That's not included in this Legion Building exterior repairs, right?
Correct.
Right, I think that's just the building.
So, is it, the memorial could have been included, it wasn't, somebody needed to present it and they didn't?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, because they were saying that things had to be like vetted and had, like when they were here, I don't remember if you were here, but it was like,
Somebody probably never made a proposal.
yeah, you have to ask for it and then they have to look into it if it
Yeah.
fits in the criteria of like whatever their criteria was, I forget, and then they like look into getting it fixed.
Do you know who would have to make that proposal?
Anyone.
Any
Like you
citizen
could
can-
call
You
any,
can go to
make-
their meeting and.
Can make
yeah,
any.
like you
Yeah.
can go and do
They
it.
have a form you
Right.
need to fill out. and all
But
that good stuff.
presumably, it would have to be one of the stakeholders, like.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think she's asking who
Yeah,
did
no,
the
they had
Legion
said-
building
I
or
thought there
something.
was
I actually
like a War
don't-
Memorial Committee.
I actually don't think that it does have to
Veterans
be.
Memorial
a-
Veterans,
Committee,
yeah,
yep.
right.
Would they be in charge of that?
Of the War Memorial?
To the left of the Legion?
Yeah, they would be.
Yes.
Yeah,
They would be?
absolutely.
So
They
they
could
just-
present to the Community Preservation
They
Committee
just didn't
a
ask. Do they
request.
have their own fund?
No.
They would
Don't
have
have
to
a budget.
ask, like, out of this.
And then they would have to
Well,
vet
they-
it to see if
they
it
could.
qualified or something.
Yeah, they could be eligible,
Yep.
yeah, right, and I know there are again, as Renee's saying, they'd have to,
I don't know, I forget what they said the specifics
Yeah.
were for like certain things, and it's all a percentage of certain, yeah.
Mhm.
It's like a big formula.
So that's still a committee,
The Veterans of War Memorial.
veterans?
Yeah, it is.
It is?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. It's a full committee, too.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Filled a vacancy maybe a couple months ago. Christine.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's active, yeah.
Other questions? Okay, Article 8, see if the town will vote to borrow the sum of $600,000 to purchase and equip a new rescue pumping engine to replace a 1982 Maxim fire engine currently on loan from Bridgewater. The fire chief did talk to us about this when he was here. How would we go about funding this?
Well, there's a
I know
couple,
we've done different things with different.
there's a couple different options. Initially, this was proposed as a straight borrowing where the town would borrow essentially within the levy limit over a period of presumably 10 years. The selectmen have requested, and Sonia Hodge has provided information on what that would look like as a capital exclusion, a one-year capital exclusion for the $600,000 that's estimated here, and that would be approximately $120 a year on the average household as a one-year capital exclusion. So whether or not that is what the board might recommend in the form of a motion to fund this is yet to be determined. Therefore, that would obviously be a contingency on a vote at town meeting.
What would be the reasoning to do it that way? The one-year capital as opposed to?
Well, a one-year capital would be, it would be more cost-effective. A 10-year, over a
Less
course of 10
interest.
years would probably be about, I think the number was probably about $750,000 to $780,000 with interest over 10 years or so. Obviously, it's not something that would have to be absorbed into our debt service over, 10 years or so, which obviously is a nice advantage, but, so, really, it's, and the board, I think, I'm putting words in people's mouths, but I think the board felt that the ladder truck got such tremendous support a couple of years ago, which was, well over $1 million, I think, but 1.2 million, that there was some consideration that that's just something that may be well supported by the town, that's all, and perhaps they should be given an opportunity to support it. Again, I'm kind of putting words in people's mouths, it was just, it's something that was raised, the board hasn't voted to do so, but it's just a question that was raised, and they did ask for what an approximate number would be in terms of impact. They haven't voted to do that,
So doing it the other way, what would be the impact to the homeowner?
when you say,
$120 a
when you
year.
say the other way, what do you mean by that?
So,
The 10
yeah,
year.
if we do a 10-year.
Well, a 10-year, well, when,
It was estimated, I think she said it was about $25 a year.
oh, are you talking about, as a capital?
capital
Oh, not as a,
10-year capital
Not as a
exclusion?
1 year.
oh, was
a
it,
10-year
so as a
debt
debt exclusion, okay, okay. As opposed to a 1-year capital exclusion, okay, so about, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you meant initially,
So if it's a debt exclusion,
so,
spanned out over 10 years, the approximate price would be about $25 for the average homeowner.
Right.
Mhm.
If we do it as a 1-year
it would be
capital plan, it's a $120 increase to
on an
the
average home of
homeowner.
about $340,000 average home.
So it's cheaper to do it
So-
at one time.
So
Twice.
$10 a month for 1 year, one time. So that still would, again, that's still a contingent upon a ballot vote, as opposed to a vote by the town to simply borrow. Again, I'd be crazy not to say, I'd much rather have the public vote to buy it outright. But, you know, that's still a decision by the selectmen whether or not they wish to, you know, whether they're willing to call for, because it does take a decision by the Board of Selectmen whether or not they wish to seek a special election. They're willing to do that. So it'd obviously have to be the selectmen and the finance committee would have to be in concert on whether or not that's something you'd like to pursue. So,
Because then there'd be a
You know.
subsequent cost to the town to
think-
hold the,
I think it can go on with the
or you
primary.
could do it with the.
well, it
Yeah,
can
you
go
wouldn't
on,
have to
yeah,
do a
you wouldn't need a
special
special election. It would just
Okay.
go on
Yeah,
the
that's-
next
in this
available,
case, yeah.
you know, so.
And is there stuff like that that happens every year, not just this particular thing? Is there, every year there's certain things that just happen?
Well, it's rare. I think that, again, the ladder truck a couple of years ago, the tower truck. Tower truck, and,
It's very specific
which
about-
actually led into the school, the major school vote. But prior to that, I don't know how long it's been since there's been any
Was that all
capital.
on the same ballot?
No, actually, the ladder truck was 1 year before.
Yes.
You know, it actually kind of led into, was this little stepping stone into the
Special
school.
election
the-
for
the
the
school. Yeah, I
school
remember
vote,
this.
yeah.
I know.
So
Oh,
it
So
was-
if you have to do, like, that's why I was asking, so if they had to do that separately, there'd be a cost associated with
Right,
that.
but if you add
But
on to a
If
different.
they added on to if they can add it on the primary ballot, then we wouldn't have
We're
the
already paying
additional
for that,
costs.
yeah.
We're already doing
Right.
it, so they could already vote,
Right.
so.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
No, but it's not typical to purchase equipment with a capital exclusion, but it's not typical to buy major equipment either. I mean, we have equipment that's outdated, that's why. So, obviously, the chief would rather know on May 21st for sure if he's getting a vehicle, but on the other hand, I'm sure he'd be fairly.
It just sounds like it's something that happens a lot, just because the guys that have been sitting here have been talking to us about not having good equipment, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, it seems like it's,
Sure, yeah.
I guess maybe if you don't do it for a very long time, this is what happens. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
What is it, so say we did put it on the primary and it, for some crazy reason, didn't pass, then
We'd be back here next year looking to
they'd still
presumably just,
continue to use Bridgewater's,
they'd be using what they have now until we went forward and probably then had to just do it through a borrow and absorb it into our debt service after all.
Yeah.
So it's, it's really, it wouldn't be any other choice.
Right.
Wouldn't be any other choice, so. So do you give it a shot and give people the opportunity to do it through a capital exclusion, which ultimately is more cost-effective, it saves you the interest. It certainly saves the impact on the operating budget through having to absorb it into your debt service, which obviously is certainly well appreciated on multiple fronts. So it is quicker and cheaper. But if it doesn't
When's that-
pass,
when's that
you're obviously a
primary?
year out.
when's the primary?
September.
Yeah. Yeah,
Day after
September, is
Labor
it
Day.
September 4th?
yeah, so
I
it's,
believe
so
it's
it's, yeah, so it's not that far out, so,
I'm just thinking you'd want to,
you know,
definitely want to educate people
yeah.
about why it's showing up on that, if that's what they
Yeah.
chose to
So-
do.
So again, it's a decision the selectmen, obviously, I mean, obviously, they'd appreciate whatever recommendation the finance committee has on the subject. You know, obviously, you have to do that at town meeting anyway, so, but that's where the selectmen have left it at the moment in terms of their consideration on it. So they have been provided the numbers, and they did, as you know, they've got 2 new board members coming in the door in a well, another week, so they kind of left it up to the wisdom of
The new board.
the new board to decide if they're willing to do that, so.
So, just so I understand, depending on what they determine at their, I assume at their next meeting, will determine if it's actually,
Well, it's going to be on the warrant.
On the
The only
warrant,
question is
so-
whether or not at town meeting, they would be supportive, well, not necessarily at town meeting, but whether or not a majority of the board was going to be supportive of a debt exclusion, a ballot vote.
Putting
Because
it
only the
on.
selectmen can call for a ballot vote.
and
Presumably, if town meeting
so
wishes
if
to go in
town
that
meeting,
direction, the
if
board
town
will.
meeting approves this article in May,
Yes. Town meeting would have to do so, would also,
with a
With a
contingency
contingency-
on the funding being approved
as a
at-
capital
as a
exclusion.
capital exclusion.
Correct.
A one-year capital
And if-
exclusion,
Correct.
not a debt exclusion.
Not a debt exclusion, a capital exclusion.
'Cause
Well, town meeting could do it either way.
Yeah.
Town meeting could approve one or the other. Couldn't do both, wouldn't do both. You do one or the other. You do one or the other.
Or your third option is just to fund it through your operating budget.
budget.
Oh, yeah, or just to borrow the money.
Right, borrow the money.
Correct.
Your retainers through your operating budget.
That's, yeah, correct.
And that would not be contingent on additional.
Exactly. Exactly, so.
There'd be,
But if presumably if town meeting votes contingent upon a ballot vote, the Board of Selectmen would have to be willing to call for that vote. You know, I mean, they could, presumably, it's possible they could choose not to. They have that authority. I have a hard time thinking a Board of Selectmen would not follow the wishes of town meeting. So, what are your druthers, you know? So, anyway, so those are the options before the town, so.
Okay.
So it says the engine that they have is on loan from the town of Bridgewater. Are we paying Bridgewater for that truck?
There's no fee.
It
There's no
was
fee, no.
complimentary.
Wow.
Those are the ones you want to keep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
It is a
It's from like
1980.
1982 though.
yeah,
Classic.
exactly.
That's like really old.
Well,
Like if you have a
past
fire, if
inspection.
you really want a
Yeah, no.
1982 truck, you
Yeah,
wanna-
When you get the new one, does it have to go back?
it might have the
Well,
same
it's-
trouble passing
yeah.
inspection that your
Yeah.
classic car would. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that
I'm sure
way.
it will, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty
We'll
old.
have to
Yeah,
put
it
it
is.
somewhere. So, anyway.
Any other questions before we move on from the fire engine? Okay, Article 9 is previously mentioned health imperative, which, is that the name of it?
Yes, that's a new name, Health Imperative.
Yes.
They've
It
changed
changed
a
a
few
couple of
times,
times.
haven't
Yes,
they?
yes.
Yes.
I know, I can't.
I think in
difficult to keep track of.
email, just earlier today, it was women's.
It was Women's Place Crisis Center.
Crisis
Yeah.
Center.
Yeah, I
So-
think that's what I
Called
think
it,
that's
yeah.
my,
Yeah.
I've
That's-
been
that was
calling
the
it that for so
original,
long,
'cause
I
it
just
was always
can't,
that.
I
Yeah,
can't get
now it's
that
Health
name
Imperative.
out of my,
I think
Out
it was
of
a
Brockton.
vernacular.
New day.
It was a
Yeah.
new day. It went
I
from
said the
Women's
wrong, I
Place
said
to
the
a
wrong
new
thing
day.
earlier. I said A New Hope, which is the original Star Wars movie, and not a women's funded. So,
You're exactly right.
so yes, for anyone that is not familiar, this is a program that runs out of Brockton.
Yep.
That does work with Abington residents.
Yes, absolutely. And this helps their funding for the towns. Traditionally, town meeting has approved it for many years now.
Yes.
They're very appreciative of any funding that they get.
If any of the newer people who have not had them come in, would like to have them come in at next week or the week after's meeting, we could potentially
I could ask them.
reach out to them.
I think I mean, I'll Google it, but it sounds like,
Yeah,
why would I not
there's
want
a-
that?
there's a
kind
lot of
program, so
information.
They do have a lot of information
Yeah, so I-
available, so.
it's like a no-brainer, but
Yeah.
I can, like I said, I can Google it, but I don't see why it would be, like,
Yeah, they're right out of Brockton.
yeah. And there's definitely not enough programs for things through, like, health insurance, so it's nice to have something
Very true.
else.
Article 10, placeholder.
Yes.
Surplus properties.
Yes, this is some language, we're still, as you can see, a couple of these town council, we had, last year, there was some properties declared surplus by town meeting. We have a surplus land committee that, at least at this point, does indeed intend to put some properties before town meeting that were declared surplus last year, to put them on the warrant for disposition, because it's a two-step process. One is to declare them surplus, the other is to actually put them on the town meeting warrant, to have the town actually approve disposal, meaning for either auction or other form, either through RFP, to actually allow you now to sell them or dispose of them in some other form. So we have a subcommittee that is working, this surplus land committee, that it does intend to propose that's a small number actually be disposed of, which would put them back on the tax rolls. That's the intent. So there is some fairly simple language, but ultimately there's going to be a small list of properties that's being proposed by the surplus land committee.
Article 11,
Yes.
so it was approved,
Right,
so then what?
The
How-
towns can ban the sale.
Yes.
but I thought if it was approved, if it was a vote for, in that town for the sale of marijuana, then it, like, I'm not wording this well,
It
I'm
has
getting
to
tired.
also be approved at the ballot box. So,
Wasn't it already approved when we all voted on it?
well, the ban has to be.
As
if-
a-
Oh,
if
the
it's-
ban would have to be
if-
voted
If the
on.
ban is approved at town meeting, the ban also has to be approved
Okay,
at the
so,
ballot box too.
so the town of Abington, when we all voted for the law in favor, Abington as a whole voted in favor as well, correct? So that's how we can even have marijuana shops? Am I saying, I'm not saying
Yes,
this right.
well, the state law, that was approved allows, effective this date, a date in June, allows
Yeah.
for retail marijuana shops. So there are several questions that are gonna be before the town. One is for a ban. If that's approved, then it also has to be approved at the ballot box at a subsequent election. What form that's gonna take would be
Now, why would we
determined.
want to ban it?
That's a question for your elected leaders.
Okay, just because it would
It's
bring in
federal law.
revenue.
That's something
Huh?
that's
It's
selected.
against federal law.
Federal law, right, but I mean,
But that's something
Colorado,
that's-
I mean, it brings in revenue. is
That's
all.
one of the options the
Okay.
selectmen want to put in front of
Okay.
people. As you know, that's something that's going on.
Will they have numbers, Rick? Do you think they'll have numbers of, if we didn't ban it, if it goes the way it's supposed
I
to,
think
we could bring in
one of the
$1 million tax?
Now, one of the selectmen,
Numbers are very,
I think, suggested that the numbers he looked at was in the $30,000 to $40,000 range is what it would bring in.
That's it?
Yes, that's it. I don't know,
But then can't you add like an extra tax or something?
well, that's the tax we're talking about.
3%.
The extra, okay.
Now, again, I don't know if, it hasn't been studied to any significant degree. I'm just,
I just didn't know if there was like if a town brings it in, the average town brings
Well, because
in.
didn't like, I don't know, didn't Colorado do a lot better once it became legal, like
Yeah.
as a state?
but I don't know what their
revenue?
laws are, I don't know what
I
their
know, I don't know,
revenue
yeah, I
laws
mean,
are.
obviously we're not Colorado, but I mean, they just did a lot better after.
So the other article below it is another, one of the statutory options is to allow for, by the way, there's a public forum tomorrow night at the high
I
school
know.
on this, so if you can make it, I think
I'm
we
trying,
all might
yeah.
learn something. I'm going to attend it too. In fact, town council will be there, and she
Yeah.
may have some information. One of the issues of concern in general is that this is kind of playing out on weekly, monthly basis as the Attorney General's office has opinions and then updated and differing opinions on, from town to town to town, on how this is still playing out. So it does make it a little bit of of an ongoing concern. The Article 12, for instance, is a vote that, by statute, that allows towns to limit the number of retail establishments in town to the number of 20% of the number of liquor establishments, number of
Package stores.
package stores. I think the language in the statute is common package stores, which initially was determined by the Attorney General to mean all, like all liquor establishments, that, establishments that sell all liquor.
Not like gas stations.
Or
Exactly,
Trukey's, like they said.
exactly. Well, apparently differing,
Yeah. I'm sure there are different opinions on it.
well, it shouldn't be differing opinions from the Attorney General's office, though.
Right.
Yeah, I guess.
And therein lies the problem. So one of the other options that the town will have will be to extend the moratorium that's currently in place while some of these,
Particulars?
some of these particulars at the state level play themselves out, so the people will know what they're voting on when there's finally something to vote on. So, again, this is stuff that's above my head with our elected leaders of the towns, and with the voters of the town. So, some of these questions might be a little clearer to the public after the public forum tomorrow night at the high school, if people have a chance to, which I assume will be on cable too, so,
Will people be able, they're going to only be able to use cash, correct?
I'm sorry?
If you
Only be
use a
able-
credit card or anything that goes across state lines, you have issues with the bank, right? Have they figured out how they're
Oh,
going to
there
work
is,
all that?
I know what you're talking about, and I think that's why people are having an issue with it, because there is.
They set up
It's
state
that-
Issue of
banks only
payment.
so that they can put it into a
Oh,
bank? Has- there are a whole bunch of
Don't
things
wander
people
all
have to
the
think about.
Yeah,
Well,
this is
you know what, I think.
I
we're
know.
beyond my,
I think so too.
so, again,
We're always looking for
so
money.
two of the articles are found here, and then a couple of the moratorium article, one of the planning articles, as well as the zoning question, because one way or the other, unless there's a ban, which will also have to be subsequently ratified by a town ballot vote, it would have to be zoned. And the zoning question is something that the planning board has held a hearing on, as you know, which is continued public hearing. So in multiple forms, the question of retail marijuana will be in front of the public, so.
So could you just say it again? The Attorney General said 20% of full liquor licenses,
Uh,
not just beer and wine?
Well, that was the,
One of the things
apparently
they
the
said.
opinion initially that had been reported by town council, that the opinion that they had been receiving from the Attorney General. And then apparently that has been evolved from what they are now hearing from the AG's office. So it's fuzzy now in terms of what 20% refers to. So this stuff is still playing out, which is not very helpful.
Are you connected to what the other towns are doing with this? I mean, I know you don't work for Hanover, meaning like,
Marijuana.
Well, I mean, we are, obviously, we know what the votes are in other towns, but the.
meaning like the town manager of Hanover, have you spoken to him? I don't know if it's approved or not, I have no idea, I'm just making
Well,
it up.
we do know what other towns are doing.
Yeah.
We know what the
Yes.
votes are, we know what the, I
Yeah.
mean, it's actually rather interesting how many towns are adopting bans in these towns that did indeed vote in favor.
Legalization.
But keep in mind when the vote for legalization occurred by the initiative petition, there were no parameters on what that meant. And now
Yeah,
that the
that's right.
Cannabis Commission has been set up, and there's some parameters on what this means, and it's being put to the public. Say, there's a difference between, do you want this, legal in your state versus do you want it sold in your community? Well, that's a different question for people. So, again, it's not my job to tell people how to vote, but it's a different question for people than it was in a statewide ballot when there's no parameters on a question. So,
Also harbor a guess that the people that vote in a statewide election is a different range of demographic than the people that attend a town meeting.
it could very well be. It could very well be. So, and again, for some people, it may be a question of potential revenue in a community too. If it's legal, why not collect revenue? You know, and what is that revenue really going to look like?
Right, but revenue,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's my big question.
That's my, and I mean,
No, it's
to
a-
me,
it's a
I mean, I
legitimate
know
question.
everybody's very different,
No.
but we sell alcohol. So, I mean, addiction-wise, alcohol's 100 times worse for you than
I don't-
marijuana. So I
well,
mean.
I don't touch
you
the
know,
stuff,
Yeah,
so.
I know, I'm not saying, I'm just saying in general.
Why are you laughing at me?
So,
All right, I've been
Yeah.
known to.
and I think we need to
Yeah, that's what I'm just saying. like,
continue
to-
on.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Do you happen
You're gonna keep
to
going
know-
down that slippery slope there.
Sorry, Greg.
Do you happen to know how many fall and how many beer and wine licenses Abington has?
Yeah, package store licenses is 4, so if the 20% applied to that,
Oh, wow.
we would have one.
We'd have one.
We'd have one.
And what about beer and wine?
Beer and wine, as far as not consuming on the premise, like a Trukey's, for example.
That's what, it's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't apply to restaurants, right?
Correct.
Just
Well, again,
sales.
that's
You
what,
think.
Right now,
right now, that's our, yeah.
and there would be 20, but that we don't, you know, if that,
Including the 4-packies?
nope, totally separate.
20.
20 for like
So
the, like,
24.
so that'd be 20, 24. Then there'd be another category, which would be the 5, like, the Trukey's, that, sell beer and wine.
So what's the 20?
So in total.
20 would be restaurants, like Sorrel, or,
restaurants.
yeah, the 20
Yeah.
would be the
So-
restaurants.
But if
20
you're
is
just talking, if you're talking just package
Talking
stores
just
and
package
beer and
stores,
wine,
beer and wine
it's
is
talking-
five,
Stores, beer
so
and
it'd
wine
be
is-
9 total.
it's 4. So you're
It's 4.
talking 9 total.
Yeah, and then you'd be
Yeah.
talking the other 5 if you were talking like a
Trukey's.
So 9 total, so it would be 2. And so it's
Okay.
either 1 or 2,
Yeah.
depending on
Well, it
how they
looks like it.
define
Yep.
what the total is that you're getting
Right.
the 20%.
And again, that's, no,
Oh, I
exactly.
thought we were talking about like
Well, again,
25 of them.
no, but once
we're talking
again,
about one.
you have an evolving,
Yeah.
opinion
And then-
on what, you know, what.
I probably shouldn't say this.
You do
don't
have,
know.
and there's just
We don't
another,
know.
just so you know, there's another category of having beer and wine consuming on the premise, like a Yaz's Table, for example, who just got a beer and wine.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's
I'm-
gonna be included.
But again,
that's another three,
that's the
just for your
problem.
information.
That's the problem.
So we don't really know
yet.
yet.
What the evolving opinion of the AG may be in terms of what, when this was added to the warrant, the 20%, this was a request, again, of the Board of Selectmen, it seemed pretty clear what that meant. It seemed pretty clear that would
Package
limit
stores.
the retail establishments, if this were going to be allowed in Abington, to no more than one.
One.
And the question that was going to be that of zoning. That has evolved and to be a murky question, which is only getting murkier at the moment. So,
So
I don't know.
when you say 20% of 4, you'd have to round it up to allow for the 1, because
Yeah.
20% of 4 is
Yeah.
not 1.
Yeah.
So the
Exactly.
state allows you to round up.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for the 2. Right? So the 9, it would be the same thing.
Yeah, right, so,
So, Article 13,
yes.
So now I can see why it's only 20 or 30 grand.
Yeah, right,
It makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
see if the town would vote to raise and appropriate 75,000 for services to review and update zoning bylaws.
Yes, this was a request of our Board of Selectmen, right, and particularly in light of a lot of the petition articles that have come in recently with regard to zoning, and my understanding it's been many years since there's been comprehensive update. I don't know if it's ever been a comprehensive update of the zoning bylaws before my time, so obviously it would be unbecoming for me not to make accommodation on a spending plan for an article requested by the appointing authority.
Yes.
So, and
It's
I've,
listed in the articles we discussed with the free cash spend.
and having been through it, I also know it can be a very productive process too. Did get a couple different quotes from some of my peers. They range between $60,000 and $100,000. So this is a good faith estimate. This is not a quote from a consulting contractor based upon an RFP. It's just a good faith quote based upon some input from peers over about a week and a half of trying to do my best with a fairly late request in the process, as you know, so.
Why are we changing more zoning bylaws if we're gonna look at them all again?
Who's we?
Well, there are petitions,
Well, petitions are petitions. Petitions are not,
okay,
Town manager's office doesn't control what is petition.
yes.
Okay.
And again, the petitions, I think, are part of the reason the Board of Selectmen have suggesting that,
Yeah, if we're seeing all these
Again-
petitions,
again,
maybe
this
we
is-
need to,
this is not a criticism of
Yeah.
petitions or petitioners. That's part of the legal process everywhere. But I think some would suggest it's the same of a petition to have legal marijuana in Massachusetts, that perhaps petitions aren't the way you make laws. But you make laws through a thoughtful, deliberative process, and sometimes you need professional consulting to do that.
and why don't we know who the petitioners are?
We do.
We do.
Mr. Riley, I think, is the petitioner, Sean Riley, on a
Because
lot of the
there's
petition
nothing
articles.
here saying who they
Well,
By
were.
petition.
By petition. I mean,
Right,
Well,
by-
petition is a list of is a whole bunch of names.
A petition
But I know
requires
Sean
for
Riley
annual 10
is-
signatures, so there's
Yeah.
a main petitioner.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
by
you can-
petition.
yeah, anyone can get a copy of the petition itself.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but it's not like, but Sean Riley, I think, is the one who submitted and organized, I think, most of the petition articles on zoning.
Okay.
I know he obviously finds there to be a weakness in a lot of the zoning, some of the zoning, but in general, the Board of Selectmen requested this because I think it's been
No, I agree with that.
15 to 20
yeah.
years, I think, since there's been a significant effort to update the zoning, is what I've been told. I think the attitude is you don't do significant zoning updates through petition. You do it through a deliberative process. And I think on the heels of the sign bylaw, which is a zoning, but that I think that was somewhat of thought to be a little bit of a model. You know, you put appropriate people together from different bodies involved, and they did utilize a lot of services from our town council. And that's more of a model of how you do zoning update than through petition articles. So that's in theory what the thought process is, so, in any event, that's,
Article 14, South Shore VOTEC, changes to the intermunicipal agreement with respect to the establishment of the vocational regional high school district. What the changes are, and are they financial related in any way?
they are not.
All
They are
right.
not. Our document has been updated since the addition of a couple of the members, and it's some antiquated language, and it's very simple. The school superintendent, Mr. Hickey, met with the Board of Selectmen on Monday and went over the changes. It's really parliamentary updates. But he did email us a redlined version. I'm happy to send that along to you, or anyone else on the committee that wishes to have it.
if you could, that
I'll
would be
send
good.
it out to
Yeah.
the entire committee. I'd be happy to do that.
Article 15, the raise and appropriate 20,000 to update the town's master plan.
I don't even have a pen. This,
We have,
Does anybody use
Um,
that?
Use the method?
well, I
Yeah,
hope
I-
so. The master plan is
Now
it's
10
now
years
10
old.
years old. It's intended to be updated, not to be more than 10 years old. In fact, if it's not, it generally puts you out of contention for state grants, actually,
Mhm.
if it's not updated every 10 years. But the 20,000 is actually rather economical for, I think the intent is to actually hopefully gain the services of Old Colony Planning Council to assist with it rather economically, and some use of some interns through Old Colony Planning Council. Because other than that, it would be a heck of a lot more expensive
That's a great
to
idea.
do that, so.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So the
Just-
20,000
10
for
years
the
old.
interns?
No, it's for Old Colony
For the
Planning
whole
Council's, their professional services contract. And the reason why it's so economical is because I think they're going to utilize interns on their end. That's my understanding.
Sixteen through 28, planning board zoning articles that we don't have details for yet. I believe you said we'll have those
Have those tomorrow.
tomorrow.
ahead of me.
Will you
Oh, the zoning articles.
forward those to us?
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
forward you a revised
Yeah.
tomorrow along with the agreement with the South Shore Road TAP.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And the other questions.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
29, by petition, the town will vote to amend section, read the cross text, dimension requirements, buildings shall be located a minimum of, instead of 250 feet from an existing lot line or street line, instead of 25, 10 feet from any proposed parking area.
Does it say,
Parking area, minimum of 50 feet.
resident, or is it a business? Kinda sounds like it might be the petitioner.
I actually don't.
The
Do we
petitioner for
expect-
number 29?
Uh-huh. You're asking who?
Oh, is it like a resident or a business
Who
or?
is petitioning?
These are all Sean Riley's.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so,
the rest of this is just,
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
voting
these petition
stuff.
articles are Sean
Zoning,
Riley.
yeah, proposed by Mr.
Right,
Riley,
yeah.
zoning up.
and no financial impact on us, right?
Right, no-
What does Sean Riley do?
Lawyer?
He's our town moderator.
Oh, yeah.
Moderator who appointed you to this board.
Land use.
He's your guy.
Nice.
So 16 to 28 are zoning things that we don't have details for. 29 through 32 are zoning
Zoning petition.
things that we do have details for.
These are the
They're not-
details.
they're not zoning though, are they? 29 is not zoning.
30 is zoning
Yes.
bylaws. 29 looks like
It's
zoning.
zoning,
Yeah,
yes, it's
zoning.
zoning, yes.
Oh, because it said by petition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all
Zoning.
those are,
They're all zoning.
those are 4 petition articles.
They're all zoning.
Zoning.
So they're,
For the zoning board? They're not the zoning board, is what I'm saying.
Well, they're
No,
all
they're
No, they're by
petition
petition.
articles.
By-
It's
right.
completely separate from the zoning board of appeals. Yeah, exactly.
so 16 to 28 are zoning board.
Well, well,
Planning board.
Planning
Planning
board
board.
technically
Planning board.
holds
Planning
here.
16 to 28, we're
board.
waiting, we'll have those.
And
Yes.
Planning board
29 through
tomorrow.
32 are zoning petitions,
Correct,
zoning-related petitions.
right,
Which the planning board is holding has public hearings on.
yes.
And make recommendations on all zoning.
Which the, yeah, you're right. the Board
Proposals.
of
Based
Selectmen-
on what we are seeing, we don't envision financial impact from 29 through 32.
Well, everything has a financial
Well,
impact, one way or another, can.
Yeah. They've been
You-
deferred to the planning board, these are the articles,
Yeah.
for review by the Board of Selectmen.
Are there questions on any of these 4 tonight?
Not sure we can
Well,
answer
You
any of them.
probably can't answer
them. There's a lot
In
of
fact, I'm
wording.
sure we can't answer them. Only
There's a lot of wording in them, so the newer members know a lot of times issues that are planning board or zoning board issues that do not have very specific current financial aspects to them, we tend to defer to the planning board or the zoning board.
Except that we wouldn't really
But-
know that,
But where these are by petition, that's a different story where we don't, it's not being petitioned by a board that we would defer to.
It's, yeah,
We could theoretically defer our recommendation
to the planning board.
to the planning board, but
could we have the planning board in to
Yeah, well, the zone,
the zoning board?
Well, it wouldn't be the zoning
It would
board,
be
the planning board
the
would
Board of
make
Selectmen,
recommendations.
yeah, had deferred these to the planning board for the planning board's recommendation.
Right. Which they're actually
they're-
required to do legally, because the
Right.
planning board is, I mean, the
Right.
selectmen is the board who is, sets the annual warrant. On the other hand, they don't have an option but to put petition articles on the warrant.
Right,
But
So
the
they'll-
planning board is required by law to hold public hearings on properly submitted zoning changes.
Well, so can we either have the petitioner in or the planning board or both to,
Next week.
Yeah, but when's the,
Petitioner.
when is the
That's
planning
When?
board's
May
continued
7th.
public hearing?
May 7th.
Really is not in our
Planning board is
purview.
meeting on May
Okay.
7th.
It's not really in our
Because the
purview.
planning board isn't going to
know,
probably.
we don't know that.
The planning board probably wouldn't come in
Yeah,
before
there
their
are
public
times
hearing.
where there
Yeah, why
have
do we-
things
So the petitioner would be the only one you
Petitioner.
may,
specific impacts.
Should ask the petitioner.
petitioner
Wanted
would,
to
might
go.
be
This
more
definitely
appropriate before the
Doesn't seem like it would
public hearing.
impact us.
Just
no.
so that we know if,
Oh.
like,
He may
Yep.
have,
Yep, he'd probably love to.
you can only decline.
Yep.
That's a worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. Wow.
Any other questions on those before we discuss them next week? Again, like the budget, dig into those a little bit. There's definitely a lot of wording there that you might want to ask questions about. Again, our role on those is to try to determine what the financial impact for the town is, if there's any that is readily determinable. So, I know there have been things in the past like heights of signs that it's hard to tell whether something is going to have a financial impact, so that's why we tend to
Right.
defer on things like that. But there are other things that have had more tangible impacts that we've made a recommendation on, so.
due diligence.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't know
definitely.
unless you ask.
Know what
Yeah.
we're voting on and know what we're deferring to.
Right. Know what it is before you decide one way or the other.
That's right. Could have something that, something that could change the zoning from, this sounds, extremely simplistic, but changing zoning from residential to commercial, and it's extremely simple, but that could have a significant
Well,
impact.
sometimes even like adopting a
You know what I mean?
street, if the,
Something like that,
if the,
But
Too simple, but
buyer
that's a-
can't get down there, or if they're not going to be plowed, or if they, it affects the town
Or,
financially.
for example, in past years, we've had issues of zoning of potential areas of construction within Union Point that we've had discussions on
Yeah,
as
fair enough.
Yeah.
do we put
Fair enough.
residential, do we put
Yeah,
Yep,
industrial or
Sure.
commercial in there?
Right.
So,
yeah.
those have
Good point.
large impacts for the
Yeah.
town, so.
Hmm.
Any other questions there? Any other questions at this hour for our town manager, or assistant town manager? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
And again, please let us know if, between now and next week, if we need anything, well.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yep,
okay, great.
perfect.
With the document, with the, social, okay.
Thank you.
all right.
Thank
All
you.
right.
And once again, the forum tomorrow night.
Right.
Yep.
Should
Anyone
be,
that can
should
go.
be interesting.
Time's
If
that
you can
start,
go.
Rick?
7.
7 o'clock, yeah.
Is that at the high school?
It's at the
The
auditorium,
auditorium,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So very good. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to our regular business, do we have any liaison
Thanks, Ben.
reports?
I do. So I talked to the police chief. One of the questions we had at the last meeting that I was at was about, the difference between having one detective maybe the whole year or 2 detectives halfway through. And he said that for himself, he'd prefer the 2 halfway through. The one, but the hiring process and everything would take 6 months anyways, so he would prefer the.
It's funny, I talked to him too about that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Barbara, what you faded out there.
So the 2 halfway through was
Thank you.
his preference, but
Any other reports? Any questions on that? All right. Correspondence, there were none, there was no mail this week. Minutes, we have minutes from our April 18th meeting. I know I read through them and they were very, very well put together, and I did not find any mistakes. Was reminded of things I had already forgotten about, so.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve and a second, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes? Those opposed and those abstaining?
Thank you.
Ayes have it. With that, our next meeting is next Wednesday, May 2nd. Are there any other discussion points or motions?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second. Second?
Motion and a second. No discussion. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
The ayes have it. It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like there was some sort of a prize fight.
Did we win?
I don't know.